The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
Workers at an Apple store in Maryland fighting its closure after a union election. Meanwhile, the National Labor Relations Board says cannabis processing workers have the right to unionize. And today on the show, we check in with the Columbus Central Ohio Building Trades, and it's our first Friday with Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. Welcome to the Friday, May 1st edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Dorsey Hager, our featured guest on the show today on behalf of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, longtime supporter and sponsor of America's Workforce, a website you want to go to, columbusconstruction.org. You can follow them on X at Build Central OH. And we always kick off these sessions about what's happening in Central Ohio, which is a lot. And we're going to zero in once again on these data centers. A lot of communities fighting back, saying it's going to suck up all the power. Well, they're building power plants. Good jobs for the trades. We're going to run down what's happening in Central Ohio. We're also going to touch on the legislative conference of the building trades, NAB2, North American Building Trades Conference, which was last week in Washington, D.C. And Dorsey's also going to touch on the primary, May 5th, next Tuesday in the state of Ohio. A lot of primaries all around the country. So Dorsey Hager is going to be our first guest. Then we're going to go to Fred Redmond. Fred, of course, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. This being the first Friday. It's our first Friday with Fred. And, you know, for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about Workers' Memorial Day, Workers' Memorial Week. If you have an opportunity, check out the Death on the Job report. Every year, the AFL-CIO comes out with this. And I say this on the show so many times. In my opinion, every day should be Workers' Memorial Day, because every day in America, about 15 people workers wake up in the morning, they don't come home from work. Something happened on the job. I also want to do a shout out to National Kosh. This is an organization. Every year they come up with the Dirty Dozen Employers. And I want to take this opportunity to run down some of them. One very, very popular name, Cambria, okay? Cambria LLC. Workers across the country are developing deadly lung disease after cutting and grinding engineered stone slabs made with extremely high levels of crystalline silica. Experts warn that products made from these slabs may be impossible to fabricate safely, yet Cambria, very profitable company, continues to sell them to small fabrication shops across the country while seeking immunity when workers get sick and die. There are safer alternatives available, but Cambria has thus far declined to adopt them. Here's another one. Consolidated Catfish Producers, LLC. This company presents itself as a leader in all areas of the catfish industry, but repeated workplace safety violations and worker testimony tell a different story. A pattern of serious machine hazards, including amputations and other preventable injuries, along with reports of extreme heat inside their processing plants. And here's one more. Hyundai Kia, very popular on the roads today. Hyundai and Kia are sister companies under the Hyundai Motor Group and among the world's largest automakers. They have built a vast U.S. manufacturing network fueled by over $2.7 billion in public subsidies and rapid electric vehicle expansion in the South. Behind this growth is a supply chain linked to worker deaths, child labor, unsafe conditions, and systemic labor exploitation. Workers bear the burden of a model built on layers of subcontracting and temporary staffing agencies, allowing suppliers to cut labor costs while Hyundai Kia denies legal responsibility for workplace violations. They just wash their hands from it all. Yeah, you might want to check that out. nationalcosh.org, the Dirty Dozen. Also, the AFL-CIO report that Fred's going to talk about, Death on the Job. That's at aflcio.org. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. The segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. The union representing workers at Apple's first ever unionized retail location, this would be in Towson, Maryland, have filed a NLRB charge accusing the company of illegally discriminating against its members in connection with the store's upcoming closure. Apple announced earlier this month that the Towson location would close in June, along with 2 other stores. While employees at those other locations were offered transfers to nearby Apple stores, the workers in Towson who voted for the union were not. Well, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, that's the union involved, said that Apple, this is a quote, discriminated against IAM-represented workers in regards to their terms and conditions of employment in order to discourage them from exercising their rights. Now, so far, none of the store's roughly 90 employees have been hired at another Apple location. Workers and union reps say the treatment is meant to deter unionization at other stores. No kidding. The NLRB, in the meantime, has ruled that cannabis processing workers do have the right to unionize. This after rejecting Missouri-based B-Leaf Medical LLC's argument that its cannabis processing employees qualify as agricultural workers, which are exempt from the National Labor Relations Act. We got a quote here from the Labor Board, and the Labor Board said the following: the activities of the post-harvest employees generally are not performed by ordinary farm employees, and the activities in question have only an attenuated relationship to farming in the traditional sense. So a good ruling for the workers, the cannabis processing workers from the National Labor Relations Board. You know, today is May 1st, better known as May Day, and we are at the end of our series on Workers' Memorial Day, Workers' Memorial Week. And today's story goes back to 2008, and it's a reminder that hazards don't have to be dramatic to be deadly. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, building up day after day while everyone looks the other way. And once again, we got to thank our friends at the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield for presenting this entire series for the last 2 weeks. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross and Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families and for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. February 7th, 2008, Port Wentworth, Georgia. A dust explosion destroyed the Imperial Sugar Refinery, killing 14 workers and injuring dozens more. The fuel for that explosion? Sugar dust. That's right, an accumulation of it, a known hazard which was in plain sight for a number of years. Combustible dust has long been an overlooked danger in food manufacturing, woodworking, and other industries. Well, this disaster forced OSHA to treat it seriously, leading to major new enforcement actions and industry-wide changes in how facilities manage dust. For the last 2 weeks, we've been commemorating Workers' Memorial Day, which was actually on Tuesday of this week. It's a day we stop and remember that behind every safety regulation, every required inspection, every emergency exit, every piece of protective equipment, there are workers who died because those protections did not yet exist. So honor them by knowing their names. Honor them by making sure we never go backward, okay? All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dorsey Hager on behalf of the Columbus Central Ohio Building Trade.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. It's hard to believe it's already May 1st, May Day. Dorsey Hager joining us as our featured guest today. Always check in with him on the first Friday of the month. That would be today. Dorsey is the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council. And every time we talk to Dorsey, something new is popping up in Central Ohio. Dorsey, welcome back to the show. I know a lot of things are happening in Central Ohio, good things happening, especially for the trades. And you're telling me, too, this is National Apprenticeship Week. The IBEW kind of kicked this off last week. Talk to me about what they did. And obviously, the apprenticeship programs are humming in Central Ohio. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, the apprenticeship programs are absolutely humming in Central Ohio. IBEW 683 is obviously leading the way here in Columbus and Central Ohio with growth, organizing, recruitment, marketing, outreach. We partnered with them to have a outreach event here at 683 last week, and the response was absolutely incredible. I can remember in times past, for an outreach event, you may get 50 people, 60 people, 80 people. For this 2-hour outreach event last week, we had well over 1,000 RSVPs. We had close to 1,000 people show up. The line started forming a little bit after midday. And by the time the doors opened at 5 o'clock, we had well over 300 people in line waiting to come in. We had a lot of other participants from the other locals in the building trades. So that way, if somebody came in and maybe was talking about being an electrician, maybe had other interests, let's say operating engineers, painting, plumbing and pipe fitting, those folks were here for them to talk to as well, sheet metal, a few others. So it was just a great event. You know, the folks here at 683, their training director, Trent Parker, the business manager, Pat Hook, the organizers, Aaron Adair, Chris Poff, and Cesar Laraquent, they just do a tremendous job of just really getting out, hitting folks and talking to them. And not only was it a great outreach event for folks that were maybe in high school or maybe right after high school who were wanting to learn about the trades, but we had well over 100 people that were working for non-signatory electrical contractors in other parts of the industry, either in health facilities like hospitals or at data centers that were coming in and were wanting to compare wages and benefits and, obviously see that the union advantage was better. So that was why it was awesome to have our organizers on hand to discuss with those folks too about how they could get in to 683. IBEW 683 and IBEW 1105 to the east because of all the growth and all the work that we have here in Central Ohio are two of the fastest growing IBEW locals in North America. So they're just doing a tremendous job, and we're kind of piggybacking on them and getting the word out, and just, again, constantly doing recruitment, outreach, letting folks know about a National Apprenticeship Week. I met with Sarah Ingalls yesterday, who was legal counsel for the Columbus Building Trades for a while. Now she is legal counsel for the Ohio Democratic House Caucus. But her moonlighting job, her other job, is she's pro tem for Columbus City School Board. So she's second in charge there. And we met yesterday and met with a few contractors and talked about, obviously, ways that we can reach out more in the middle schools and the high schools, let folks know about these opportunities in the trades, like we said, as pipe fitters, plumbers, electricians, sheet metal workers, operating engineers, what have you. And just what we're doing to obviously let the parents know as well these great opportunities that are there. Like I've said on your show, if somebody wants to go to college, we should do everything we can to help them do that. But if they want to come out of high school, apply for the trades, get in the trades, and before, some of their high school classmates are graduating college, finish their apprenticeship debt-free and be making a six-figure salary, then we can also help in that. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. That six-figure salary does get the attention of the student as well as the parent. Dorsey, I don't want to pit one trade against another, but the big thing that's happening, and it's not just in Central Ohio, these data centers. Correct me if I'm wrong. IBEW data center. Is that like a marriage there? It seems like that trade is so darn important to the construction of a data. I know there's others now, don't get me wrong. But that trade, being an electrician, a skilled union electrician, very important to the data center construction. Am I correct in saying that?
I think you're 100% correct. And, I was just having this conversation with 683 business manager Pat Hook yesterday afternoon. Obviously there's a ton of data center work in Licking County and out east. We have two of the Google campuses here in Columbus and Central Ohio. There's 3 Google campuses total here in Central Ohio, one in 1105 and 2 in 683. But last year, just those 3 Google Center campuses, you worked 6.5 million building trades man hours. 6.5 million. So I think it's safe to say that probably 40% of our man hours in the Columbus building trades come from data center work. The electricians are very, very important because of all the work that's done with servers, all the work that's done with security, all the work that's done with alarms, alarm systems, fire systems, all that stuff. And you're right. I mean, there's a ton of other mechanical work there for the plumber, the pipe fitter, the sheet metal worker, the insulator. But boy, the electricians really get a lot of work out of these data centers. And it seems like the younger people that are coming out of high school are more and more aware of this because they're more tech savvy. And they're really drawn to that. And when you reach out to an 18 or 19-year-old first-year apprentice, or you reach out to a journey person that's 22 or 23, and you ask them where they're working, they're very proud to say, hey, I'm working at Meta. Hey, I'm working at Google. I'm working at Microsoft. They really are proud that they're helping build the digital infrastructure here that's really, hopefully, going to help us surpass China with not only AI, but also data storage and all these other things that we talk about in these communities. And unfortunately, some of these communities that are fighting some of these data center projects.
Well, let's talk about powering these plants. It's really important. And I think a lot of the communities are upset because they feel their rates are going to go up since there's these data centers are just exploding all around the country right now. But it seems like they're self-serving, that they're creating their own power structure. Is that right?
Yeah, we're starting to see, we've already have one natural gas power plant that's come out of the ground, starting to go vertical. They're hoping to be producing power by November of this year. There's also another one proposed that's going to be breaking ground early next year, right down the street from the one that we're working on right now. And then there's a very large proposed energy center proposed in Asheville as well. So a lot of these data centers obviously are realizing that they're putting a strain on the grid electric wise. So they want to start producing their own power. So that way they can take some of that strain off the grid, take some of the strain off the infrastructure, the power lines and stuff like that. And I think that's a big selling point to the community. And it's obviously a huge selling point to us as building trades folks, because not only are we going to build the data centers and maintain them, we're going to build the power centers as well and maintain those power centers. So we're really excited about this work. We're really excited about the opportunity. And we just see this market and this industry here in Columbus and Central Ohio growing more and more and creating more and more opportunities for our members and their families, which is awesome.
Dorsey, I have to ask you, is that message, what you just relayed to me, is that message getting through to the community? Because as you know, and we've talked about this on the show, a lot of people have been very, very vocal at public meetings on these data centers. But what are you hearing right now? Is it starting to sink in that we need them and it's going to be okay?
I think it's starting to sink in. I mean, it's ironic. In Marysville and Union County, where I live, we have 3 proposed. We have 1 coming out of the ground right now, 2 more proposed, Amazon. We have a 4th that's a line that's proposed. They're developing the site now, and that one's probably going to break ground in 29 with a finish date of 2035. And then we just got a 5th data center approved through City Council a couple of nights ago, and I was there, and there was really very little pushback. You see kind of the keyboard warriors and the digital folks going to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and really pounding out some of their frustrations with data centers. I don't necessarily know if it's the data centers and the energy centers behind them. I just think that there's so much growth in Columbus and Central Ohio that it's people want things left the way they are. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen. I mean, Marysville, where I live, is a perfect example. I moved there 20 years ago. We had 12,000 residents. We have well over 30,000 residents right now. Union County and Delaware County, just to the north of Columbus, are not only the 2 fastest growing counties in the state of Ohio, but they're 1st and 3rd fastest growing counties in the United States capita. The landscape is going to change. You're going to get more hotels. You're going to get more stores. You're going to get more churches. You're going to get more schools. And you're going to get more data centers, especially with AI helping to service a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that we have here in Columbus and Central Ohio. So we just got to do our due diligence, do a good job trying to educate folks in the community about the importance of this and about the importance not only to the infrastructure, but also to the importance of the local economy here. And, you do go to some areas that are rural that you get a ton of pushback, but you also see farmers and council people and lawyers and accountants that live in those communities that are welcoming to the opportunities because of the money that they're going to provide to the tax base, but also the schools and the work opportunities that they're going to provide to the local folks. So we're just trying to do as best we can, hit a lot of these and do the best we can and get the message out.
Dorsey Hager, our featured guest on the show, longtime supporter of America's Workforce. He is the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council. Website you want to go to is columbusconstruction.org. Dorsey, I want to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk about the NAB2 Legislative Conference. You are one of about 3,000 people in attendance. And also next Tuesday, primary day. Later in the show, we're going to check in with Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. It's our first Friday with Fred. Back in a few minutes. You're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Let's go back to Central Ohio. Rejoin Dorsey Hager, on behalf of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council. Dorsey, we had Sean McGarvey on the show last week. Those of you listening, that was the April 21st show, which was the kickoff day for NAB2, North American Building Trades Union's legislative conference in Washington, D.C. I know you were in attendance. I'd like to get your take on it. I heard there was a lot of energy in that room. What do you think?
There was a lot of energy, and I think folks are very excited. We heard not only from typical type speakers that we hear from U.S. senators, U.S. congresspeople, governors, but we also heard some from folks, like Chang Suh from he's the CEO from the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust, and talking about how he's going into these communities, helping with financing to help build affordable housing, all affordable housing that's being built by local union trades members. And, they say that they can't use union to build affordable housing, and they're obviously putting aside that myth, and they're building affordable housing all over the country using some of our own union pension funds to invest in this and fill a very big need, a very big void here. We heard from Liz Schuler, who obviously is a rock star president of AFL-CIO, obviously talking about the importance of voting, upcoming elections, identifying pro-labor candidates that support us, which was great. We heard from United States Senator Brian Schatz, talked about the importance of data centers, behind the meter stuff. U.S. Senator Elisa Slotkin, who's obviously awesome. She spoke as well. Governor Mikey Sherrill, who just got elected in New Jersey last fall, she kind of kicked the conference off. She was the first speaker, and everybody got riled up and really raucous, and created a lot of excitement and energy, and got everybody fired up. And then day one ended, with New York Senator Chuck Schumer speaking, which was awesome. And then one thing that, Sean did that I thought was great, and the whole NAB2 staff did, was on Wednesday, they had either folks that work for building trades councils, like Melissa Wells, who works for NAB2, or they had other folks who are currently building trades members that are running for office. Graham Plattner is running in Maine for the United States Senate, very pro-labor, obviously he's a union member, so very pro-labor, looking out for our interests. Great candidate, gave a great speech. Jason Shedlock, who's in Maine, and he's running for, I think, the Maine House of Representatives. He gave a great speech too. He's a union laborer by trade. Our own Bill Scheer here from Ohio spoke. He's a mayor here in Ohio, and he addressed the group as well. And it was just a great day. They had some great breakout sessions too, talking about the future of AI, a little bit about data center construction and messaging, obviously some breakout sessions on pre-apprenticeship programming and this expansion of pre-apprenticeship programs. But NAB2 and Sean and the whole staff do a great job with that conference. And it's tough. It's a tough week. I'm not going to lie to you. It's busy. You're meeting with different folks, not only different health and welfare funds and medical funds, but you're meeting with different marketing people. You're trying to squeeze in, lobbying sessions with Congress folks and senators and their staff. And, it's a busy time, and every 15-minute window is pretty much blocked from about 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night. But it's good, and it's good to get to D.C. and spend that time and do the work for our members.
Dorsey, I like what you said about so many union brothers and sisters getting involved in politics, because if you want real change, you got to get workers in there. You got to get workers, whether it's a school board, a city council. Many of them are running for Congress. You mentioned Plattner. There's a guy in Nebraska we're watching. He's running as an independent. That's Dan Osborne. But next Tuesday, talk to me about next Tuesday, especially in the state of Ohio. It's primary day. What do you see happening?
Obviously, it's probably going to be a low turnout election, as most primaries are in non-presidential years. And it's unfortunate, because this is a very, very, very important primary. I've talked on your show in the past. The Columbus Building Trades was chartered in 1961, and we've never, ever endorsed in statewide races. And we felt it was incredibly important to come out and endorse in statewide races this year, especially pre-primary. Our good friend Allison Russo, former minority leader at the State House, tremendous advocate for the Columbus and Central Ohio Building Trades, union members, and all working people. She's in a primary for Secretary of State. I think she would do an incredible job if she were to get through this primary and win her general election. I think she'd do a great job as Secretary of State running our elections. I know Republicans, you can hear their podcasts and some of their radio interviews, They're incredibly nervous about Allison Russo and her power to get elected. They do not want to see a Democrat elected as Secretary of State. Obviously, we have a lot of members who are Republicans as well, and we're bipartisan, and we identify pro-labor candidates. Good friend of the building trades, has been a friend of the building trades for 10 plus years now, and another tremendous advocate for us when he was at the State House and continuing to advocate for us now is Jay Edwards. Jay Edwards is in a very tough primary for treasurer of the state of Ohio. He's got some tremendous ideas of things that he can do when he's elected treasurer, dealing with wage theft and things like that. He's running against Christina Regner, who obviously Christina Regner is no friend to labor or organized labor or working people. Every year she introduces bills to ban PLAs, to ban prevailing wage, and also introduces legislation to introduce right to work. So those are a couple of the primary races that we're focused on. We have some friends locally here that are in some primaries that could be competitive. Senator Bill DeMora has got somebody from the left challenging him in his primary. Whoever wins that primary as a Democrat is going to get elected to the State House. So obviously we're supporting Bill. Hopefully he gets through. Ryan Rivers is another Republican that's running in a Republican Senate District 2019, Delaware County. Beth Lear, no friend of the building trades. That's his opponent in that primary. So obviously we're hoping Ryan Rivers gets elected. And then last but not least, Stacy Baker, good friend of mine's on Reynoldsburg City Council. He's in a primary race. If he gets through his primary, I think his hopes look good of winning that Senate seat here in Central Ohio, which is the last Senate seat that touches Franklin County that's held by a Republican. That's not a very good Republican. So we hope Stacy can get through his primary and go on in November and get elected and represent that district in the Senate and represent all of labor as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. We're hoping that our members get out and vote. Like I said in our last meeting yesterday, that, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, make sure you get out and vote. Make sure you pull your ballot. Make sure you go through that ballot, identify these pro-labor candidates, and make sure that you cast your ballot for them and vote for them. Close to home, last but not least, Ben Weber, good friend of mine's running in the State House to replace Tracy Richardson, who's term limited. Ben Weber is a pretty progressive Republican, pro-labor, pro-growth, pro-development, pro-data center. He's running against a council person from Jerome Township who's been banging the drum on the moratoriums and the banning of data centers. So obviously we do not want to see her get anywhere close to the State House, but it's going to be interesting. We get together in our next show. We'll post game it, see how everything went, but just got to get our friends and our family members and our union members out to vote and support these folks.
Well said, my man. Do your homework. Those of you listening, do your homework. If they're pro-labor, doesn't matter if they're a Republican, an independent, or a Democrat. As long as they're on a worker's side, that's all that really matters. Love the conversation here. Dorsey Hager on behalf of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council. So those of you listening, do your homework. No matter what party they belong to, if they're on your side as a worker, they should get your vote. All right. And we'll talk about that next month. Dorsey, you take care. Dorsey Hager on behalf of the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, columbusconstruction.org. Talk to you next month. Okay, brother?
Talk to you next month. Have a great May Day flash, and we'll get together next month. Thanks so much.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Fred Redmond, it's our first Friday with Fred. Fred is Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO, and he is coming up next. Don't go away.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. Well, it's our first Friday with Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. A couple of things we're going to talk about. Obviously, the new president at the United Steelworkers. Fred spent almost his entire life with the Steelworkers and the Steelworkers Union. This week is Workers' Memorial Week. On Tuesday, it was Workers' Memorial Day. We're going to get into that because every year the AFL-CIO comes out with their Death on the Job report. Very important reading there, AFL-CIO.org. Fred, welcome back to the show. Let me ask you about Roxanne Brown. I know she became the general president of the Steelworkers at the beginning of March. I know you've been in communication with. How is she doing, brother? Talk to me about it.
You know, Rox is doing great. She came into the position battle-tested and battle-ready, and right off the bat, she was facing 2 lockouts in Northwest Indiana, one at NIPSCO, the Northern Indiana Power Company, and the other one is at BP, British Petroleum Oil Refinery. And the good news is they was able to settle with NIPSCO, the power company. They have a tentative agreement that's going to be voted on, and we expect it to be ratified. British Petroleum have dug in. They have replaced the workers with scabs. They're bringing in trucks crossing our picket line. So it's a struggle. But let me tell you, Roxanne Brown is a fighter. And Roxanne has been spending a lot of time out there in Northwest Indiana with the workers. You know, she's going to be a good president, and she's showing it every day. She's visible, and the members is really gravitating around her leadership.
Yeah, we talked a whole lot about that on the show on Tuesday's show here on America's Workforce. We had the president of that local, and yeah, they're staying strong there, and we support them 100%. And once again, here's a company that's making a whole lot of money, and they just don't want to give any of it to the workers. I want to talk about the report that was released by the AFL-CIO. You do this every year, Death on the Job, and you spend so many years in the steel industry. You've seen, it's dangerous work. The trades, dangerous work. Coal mining, dangerous work. And over the years, people had to pay the price for where we are today to make the regulations. And that's where OSHA comes in. And I just want you to reflect on the report that came out and the fact that, there's a lot of people. I think it's about 15 people that wake up in the morning. They do their job. They do their job well. Something happens on their job, and they don't come home at the end of the day. Talk to me about it, Fred.
That's true. It happens too much. It have happened over the years in all different industries throughout the United States. In the steel industry and the aluminum industry, I have witnessed firsthand deaths on the job. Caused by different factors, okay? But the key thing is, over the years, the labor movement have been able to fight for regulations to try to really, really cut those numbers down. Our goal is to go a year without no worksite injuries or no workplace injuries. And, we're going to continue to strive for that as our goal. But, the regulations that was really being enforced by OSHA, those regulations today is at attack. They're being eliminated by this administration, by this so-called labor department. So we're continuing to fight. Our job is more harder today when it comes to safety regulations on the job than it has been over the past few years. 385 workers die each day and the greater majority of those workers are workers of color. We have some good companies, some good industries that really, really work hand in hand with the union in order to make sure that those workers you was talking about, Flash, do get to come home every day. And then there's some companies that unfortunately over the years have just cut corners in order to increase their profit margin. So look, it's a continuous struggle. It has become more difficult under this administration, but we continue to fight. Head of the Department of Labor that just resigned, Dee Reamer, she was oblivious to these numbers in all respect. We had some corporations and along with unions together try to talk to her to make sure that we don't eliminate regulations, is that we increase regulations based on injuries, based on investigations. Our goal is to make sure that folks don't get hurt at work. And she was oblivious to that. She stalled and, really, really didn't address the issue of worker safety on the job. So we can only hope that the incoming head of OSHA and the Department of Labor will, hopefully make a difference in how we make sure that workers can come home at the end of a day's shift. So this has been a sober week for us. Tuesday was a sober day, but the fight continues. There's no other important issue to the labor movement than workers' health and safety on the job.
Yeah, safety first.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you, some states, certainly not all of them, have kind of picked up the slack here when it comes to their worker safety departments, their versions of OSHA. California, for one, I think it's called Cal OSHA. And then you got the right to work states who really don't give a damn about worker safety. I'm just wondering, though, the ones that are stepping forward, what are you hearing about some of those states? I mean, are they picking some of that up? And I noticed that, too, because with all the attacks on workers, they're trying to do their best to protect workers in so many different ways. What do you think?
Well, I think that, we have states, and unfortunately, it just turns out to be the majority of states with Democratic governors who have worked with the labor movement over the years, who recognize the weakness in the federal OSHA laws under this administration, and they have tried to pick up the slack. California is a good example, passed some good legislation in Illinois and other states, around the country, but it's the responsibility of the federal government. Those states are meeting a responsibility that they feel they have on the state level because these are their neighbors. These are the people that live in their respective states, and we respect that. But we think that, and we encourage a national set of regulations that's going to apply to all workplaces that meet the qualifications of OSHA. So we're going to continue to push, but one thing that we do see in those states that have state regulations, the death numbers are still high, but they're lower than the death numbers that come out of non-union states, right, the work states, as they are called. But, this is a travesty. It should be an embarrassment to all parts of government, both sides of the aisle, because workers' safety is one of those sort of things that you would think would be nonpartisan, you would think would be a priority for everybody. So the fight continues, but unfortunately, too many corporations want to cut corners for the sake of profits. And as long as the government, allows that to happen, we're going to continue, unfortunately, to have this problem.
When it comes to OSHA, it was Richard Nixon, a Republican, that signed OSHA into law back in 1970. And if you fast forward to today, somebody like that would probably be kicked out of the Republican Party. What do you think?
Oh, that's right. Without a doubt. He would either be kicked out of the Republican Party or he will have a muzzle on his mouth when it comes to worker safety and health because of the influence of the current Republican Party and their support for corporations making tons of money at the expense of workers. But Richard Nixon, look, he was a person who understood work and understood the dangers of industries throughout this country. And he felt as though it was an obligation of the government and a responsibility of the employers to provide these safety mechanisms. And the formation of OSHA saved thousands and thousands of lives over the year. You know, those regulations that was put in place by OSHA, the inspections and the fines that they wrote to encourage companies to do the right thing have really, really saved lives.
Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. It's our first Friday with Fred. Fred, you take care. Stay safe. By the way, that death on the job report, just go to aflcio.org, aflcio.org. We'll talk to you next month, okay, brother?
Okay, thanks, Flash.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. All of you have a safe and wonderful weekend.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.